revealed how one surprising wedding moment transformed everything in 30 incredible seconds. Sarah stood against the wall of the packed reception hall, her heart a frenetic drumbeat against the backdrop of laughter and clinking glasses. Her gaze drifted from her sister, glowing in white, to her family huddled together, a tight-knit team preparing to celebrate their biggest day. Yet among the joyous faces, a storm brewed within her. Was she truly happy for Lila, or was it just that familiar twinge of envy, a reminder of her own unmet aspirations slipping further out of reach? The clamor of the evening seemed suffocating. Every cheer ignited a flicker of longing in Sarah for her own dreams, a white coat instead of a bridesmaid's dress, stethoscopes instead of bouquets. What if she had chosen the path less traveled? Could she ever shake off the weight of familial obligation heavy on her shoulders? Her grandfather, a decorated military officer and family patriarch, called everyone's attention as he prepared to read a letter. Sarah held her breath. Memories of his sacrifices and his lessons about loyalty flooded her mind. "Sarah," he began, his voice steady yet rich with emotion, "I've lived a life filled with choices, some more challenging than others." As he spoke about sacrifice and commitment, her skin prickled with a mix of pride and uncertainty. Those words, meant to honor Lila, felt like a condemnation of Sarah's own stagnation. She recalled her struggles, her shift from student to caretaker when her family needed her most. An aching fight brewed inside her, each nostalgic phrase from her grandfather intensifying her feelings of inadequacy. As he continued, her eyes instinctively sought the glimmering object nestled on the display table. A family heirloom, the very representation of their lineage. Memories of her grandfather's unfulfilled dreams, a brilliant scholar cloaked in duty, wrapped around her like a heavy fog. With each word he spoke, Sarah's internal debate swelled. What if she pursued her calling and failed? Would she be met with disappointment, not just from the family but from herself? Craned necks and eager ears hung on her grandfather's every word, but her focus blurred, lost in her own whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Before she could resolve her internal turmoil, her grandfather held up the heirloom, a collection of academic achievements etched in bronze, a family legacy of brilliance reduced to forgotten whispers. The room fell silent, the collective breath held as everyone examined their shared history. A suffocating weight settled over Sarah, amplifying her dread that she might never measure up. The fear spiraled, tightening its grip. What if she chose to chase her ambitions only to be seen as disloyal? What if in her pursuit of a future she threatened the fragile harmony of family bonds? Just then, the celebratory noise surged, enveloping Sarah in a moment that felt interminable. Her grandfather's voice, steady and unyielding, grounded her in that swirling sea. She dared to glance around, a raw, visceral acknowledgement of familial pride hanging thick in the air. Was ambition synonymous with betrayal? Soon she would have to decide. Would she hold on to a shared legacy or dare to redefine it? Powerful voices wrangled within her, yet each pulse of her racing heart insisted her life was not yet written. She opened her mouth to vocalize her truth, but doubt coiled like a serpent, squeezing her intention away. The question echoed painfully within her. Was pursuing her dream worth the risk of family disappointment? A sharp inhale filled Sarah's lungs as the room cacophony swelled around her. She had to make a decision, a commitment to herself that transcended the traditional expectations of her family. An internal voice, a newfound resolve clawing its way to the surface, urged her to reject the familiar comfort of her familial obligations. The image of her sister Lila, radiant and blissful, suddenly morphed in Sarah's mind. Lila was beautiful, yes, but her sister was also brave in her choices, boldly embracing a future outlined by love and hope. What had Sarah done other than follow the script handed to her since childhood? Was it time to write her own scene? As the music of the evening pulsed through the air, her thoughts spiraled deeper. Each note beat like a drum against her fears, fear of leading a life of unfulfilled potential and the risk of leaving her family's expectations unheeded. But every beat was also a heartbeat of hope, beckoning her toward the possibilities that lay ahead. What would it take to step off the path expected of her? Alongside these musings, an odd sense of isolation washed over her. She had gradually separated from her aspirations, folding them into neat little boxes labeled disregarded and maybe someday. Yet she sat surrounded by family. Support and warmth were merely a heartbeat away. Still, her heart drifted toward moments undefined by familial affection. The clinking of glasses rang out as her grandfather's heartfelt words echoed through her thoughts. Sacrifice, commitment, dedication. But as she listened, another truth arose. Sacrifices could be made for her joy as well. The realization hit her sharp and clear. What if, for her own sake, this was a sacrifice worthy of pursuit? Just then, another guest from the corner of her eye approached the display table, reaching for the very heirloom that had, until now, only reminded her of her familial duties. A wave of protectiveness surged through Sarah, yet she felt an odd sense of empowerment as well. That common object representing tradition could also become a symbol of her courage, an emblem she could redefine. The warmth of excitement stirred within her. She turned her gaze directly to her grandfather, who was now sipping champagne, oblivious to the flicker of thoughts stealing through her mind. What if she confronted not just her dreams, but also the familial expectations shrouding them? There was a deeper weight than simply choosing her career. This was fighting for her identity, her chance to exist beyond the roles assigned to her. The tug-of-war between doubt and determination raged within her, but the seeds of ambition began to sprout. A plan unfurled slowly in her mind, a tangible approach to the uncertainty that had long held her captive. Could she face the uncertainty that would naturally come with taking that step? What were her hurdles, her fears? What courses of action awaited her? In that moment of quiet reflection amid the revelry, Sarah felt something shatter within her, an old narrative breaking free. As the laughter and celebration ricocheted through the hall, it became a fervent soundtrack for her burgeoning hope. She reached for her phone tucked deep in her clutch, mind racing with potential actions. It was time to articulate her dreams, to write her story with bold strokes. Yet before she could hit send on the message that would kickstart her journey, a familiar voice sliced through the air, an unwelcome sound demanding her attention. The time had come for Sarah to confront not just her dreams, but the reactions of those who mattered most. The familiar voice belonged to Lisa, her aunt, who glided through the crowd, her smile radiant yet expectant. "Sarah, there you are. We were just talking about you." The way Lisa's tone held both pride and an edge of expectation made Sarah's stomach churn. It was never just conversation. It was an invitation to step back into the role that had been crafted for her since birth. Sarah hesitated, her finger hovering over the screen of her phone. The draft message to her old friend Jess, a request for guidance on finally starting her graphic novel, hanging in the balance. Did she dare interrupt the tide of family expectation to make space for her uncharted aspirations? "Are you still working at the agency?" Lisa continued, oblivious to the storm brewing in Sarah's mind. "We all want to know what's next for you." The question seemed innocuous on the surface, but in Sarah's ears it echoed with judgment. In her family's eyes, a stable job was the pinnacle of success, a lifelong safety net that protected against the uncertainties of dreams. "Yes," Sarah replied, forcing neutrality into her voice, "but I'm also thinking of exploring some other options." As the words left her mouth, she winced internally. Why had she held that back? The pressure to conform tightened like a noose around her thoughts. "Oh, exploring, how exciting. You've always been the creative one," Lisa interjected with a cheerful tone, but the glimmer in her eye suggested a tinge of skepticism. "What else could you want, sweetie? You're perfect just as you are." The words felt like polished stones, both shiny and cold. Conformity, she mused, was always the easier path, cloaked in well-meaning intentions. Yet, something was shifting within Sarah as she faced Lisa. The realization that voices like her aunt's would always resonate with inherited expectations began sparking a fire of defiance. What if she rejected the easy answer? What if the rejection spurred a belief in her own voice? She could step into the conversation boldly, even in this brimming room filled with family. "Actually," Sarah said, her heart racing but her eyes steady, "I've been considering getting back to my art. I think it could be a new chapter for me." The words tumbled out with surprising clarity. Lisa's smile froze momentarily. Surprise flitted across her features before she regained her composure. "Art, dear, is that practical? You know how competitive the industry is." But there it was, a bold proclamation made in the very space crafted for hesitation. Even as doubt flickered at the edges of her thoughts, Sarah felt the beginnings of liberation. This was her moment to seize, an opportunity to redefine her relationship with her own reality. In the next heartbeat, the apprehension twisted into something stronger, a resolve. "I believe in my abilities, and I have to pursue what resonates with me now," she asserted, surprising herself. "I've held back long enough." Lisa's brow furrowed as she processed the shift, before abruptly redirecting the conversation toward lighter topics. But Sarah felt liberated. Something had shifted, not just in her declaration, but in how she perceived her own aspirations. Moments later, she excused herself, allowing the cacophony of voices to swell behind her. With swift fingers, she hit send on the message to Jess, launching her voice into the ether. As Sarah stepped outside for a breath of fresh air, her pulse quickened with exhilaration. Here was the beginning of her evolution, but she couldn't shake the sense that this was just the first step on a much longer journey. What awaited her as the sun dipped into the horizon? Would her boldness ignite a spark of change beyond the evening? Shadows of doubt still loomed, whispers of familial disappointment whispering in the background. Yet the resolve thrummed within her, a call to discover just how far she would go to reclaim her narrative. But just as she tilted her head back to absorb the night sky, a familiar stillness enveloped her. Did she truly have the courage to face further uncertainties waiting ahead? The air outside was cool, a stark contrast to the forced warmth inside. Sarah inhaled deeply, her chest swelling with a mix of anxiety and determination. The lush scent of early spring filled her lungs, and she could almost hear the soft rustle of her dreams stirring anew. Was she ready to chase after them? Pulling out her phone again, she reread her message to Jess. It was simple. "Hey, I want to start my graphic novel. Can we chat soon?" A flicker of uncertainty danced across her mind. What if Jess dismissed her idea? What if she was laughed at? Each thought knotted her stomach further, a reminder of how the weight of others' judgments could find its way back into her thoughts. But then she remembered Lisa's expression, the way frozen surprise morphed into subtle skepticism. A surge of clarity washed over her. If she dared to voice her ambitions, perhaps she could silence the internal critics too. It was time to own her path, to stop dimming her own light for the comfort of others. Minutes ticked by while she paced on the sidewalk, the distant sounds of laughter and clinking glasses fading into a hum. Her mind flickered to the last drawings she had left unfinished in her sketchbook, a world where her fears transformed into vivid landscapes, characters that fought against the darkness she often felt creeping in. Just as she began to plot the scenes in her mind, her phone chimed. It was Jess. "Yes, let's do it. When are you free?" The reply sent a rush of adrenaline through her. This wasn't just a simple conversation. It was a lifeline being thrown amidst the turbulent sea of doubt. "Can tomorrow work for you?" Sarah typed back quickly, trying to quell the sudden wave of nervousness. She knew she wanted to dive into this part of herself, but now, with the plan laid out, her stomach knotted again. She'd have to articulate her vision and her fears, face them head-on. After sending the message, she took a moment to glance at the stars sparking in the night sky. Each one felt like a beacon, metaphorical road signs towards possibility. But would she be brave enough to follow? The next day approached rapidly, shadows of self-doubt whispering warnings wherever she turned. She spent the hours before their meeting pacing around her apartment, flipping through pages of her untouched sketchbook. Ideas danced just beyond her reach, tempting her to grasp them, yet an ever-looming anxiety held her firm in place. Later, sitting across from Jess at their favorite cafe, the vibrant atmosphere buzzed around them while tension brewed inside her. Sarah felt out of place amongst the clinking of cups and laughter of other patrons. What if she couldn't convey her vision? What if she couldn't even identify it for herself? "Okay, Sarah, spill, what are we working on?" Jess's voice echoed with an eagerness that both comforted and intimidated Sarah. Taking a steadying breath, Sarah looked straight into Jess's eyes, searching for a connection to ignite her courage. Could this be the moment that she spoke her dreams into existence? "I want to create a graphic novel," she began, her voice shaking but gaining strength with each syllable. About reclaiming our narratives, especially in a world that often tries to suffocate our voices. The words poured out like long-hidden treasures, each line carefully crafted, stitched from her struggles and aspirations. Jess leaned in closer, her expression shifting into one of absolute concentration. This was it. Sarah was finally saying what had been locked inside for far too long. But just as Jess began to respond with excitement, a sudden thought pierced Sarah's newfound confidence. What if this revelation wasn't enough? What if this journey led her down a path even more daunting than the one she'd just emerged from? Sarah's pulse quickened again, but this time it wasn't just fear. There was an electric spark of possibility growing within. "The time has come to face my story," she reminded herself, grounding in the hope that perhaps the real challenge was just beginning. But as she glanced through the cafe's window at the busy street beyond, fresh uncertainties curled around her heart like tendrils. Was she truly ready for all that lay ahead? And what awaited her once she walked through this new threshold of creativity? As the cafe door swung open, a gust of cool air swept into the stifling warmth. Sarah shivered involuntarily, her heart racing in sync with the beat of Jess's excitement. Suddenly, the ambient sounds seemed to fade, muffled by the thumping in her chest. Jess's voice, radiant with encouragement, pulled her back into the moment. "I love it! A graphic novel focused on our voices. You're tapping into something that a lot of people can relate to." Jess's enthusiasm enveloped Sarah, but a shadow of doubt still lurked. Was this excitement genuine, or merely an attempt to placate her? Sarah responded, her fingers fidgeting around her coffee cup. I want it to matter. I want it to resonate with people, not just be a reflection of my fears." Jess leaned back, crossing her arms, studying her friend with a mix of admiration and assessment. "Then it's perfect for you. It has to come from your truth. What's the heart of it? What drives you?" For a moment, Sarah felt anchored to the question, rapidly pondering the essence of her story. She caught sight of herself in the cafe's glass window, a young woman who stared back with hopefulness tainted by fear. And yet, somewhere within, she sensed the barely contained power of her narrative bubbling just beneath the surface. "It's about recognizing the power of our own stories, overcoming the silence we're put in," she said, her voice stronger now. Jess nodded, impressed. "Yes, that's powerful. You need to get it on paper, spill your guts out, that's where the magic happens." But Sarah felt an unsettling ripple in the pit of her stomach. Magic? Yes, but it also meant exposing raw wounds. But what if I put everything out there and it's not enough? "Then it's a process," Jess clarified gently, leaning forward again. "Creating anything worthwhile takes time and vulnerability. Don't pressure yourself to get it perfect on the first try. Just start." Sarah glanced down at her sketchbook, the pages blank, and they mocked her. Could she really fill them with her fears and insights? Her heart thrummed, longing to unleash the ideas cascading through her mind, now ignited by Jess's encouragement. Okay, she declared, fueled by a newfound sense of determination. "I'll start working on character sketches tonight." "Yes, give them depth, make them feel real," Jess urged. "You have so much to say. Just be raw and honest." The conversation flowed, each word from Jess pulling Sarah deeper into a well of inspiration. Yet every push forward felt counterbalanced by the weight of self-doubt. As ideas poured from Sarah, she knew they wouldn't all resonate or come out perfect. The prospect of critique loomed, a nagging beast that wouldn't let her rest easy. "What if people think I'm just another voice in the crowd?" she blurted, almost pouting at her inability to quell the swirling fears. "What if they don't understand?" "Then it's not meant for them," Jess said calmly. "You're writing for the people who need to hear your story, even if they're just a few. Focus on that." As Jess spoke, clarity started to cascade through Sarah. Perhaps her voice would find its rightful place, even if it took time. Yet, as they engaged in joyous brainstorming, Sarah's thoughts wandered off to the roadblocks ahead. Would she have the resolve to face the inevitable backlash? What if her story hit too close to home for others she cared about? This could be a catalyst for her transformation, yes, but it could also unravel her world. Finally, Jess leaned back and said, "Whether it takes weeks or months, you need to commit. Don't let fear dictate your narrative." "I will," Sarah promised, but shadows of uncertainty lingered around her. "I'll start. Tomorrow." Yet even as she said it, a sense of dread loomed over the thought of time slipping away while she hesitated. As they parted ways that evening, the chill in the air echoed in her mind, a reminder that she was standing at the precipice of her aspirations and fears. Was every step forward going to emerge from the ashes of self-doubt? In her apartment, Sarah stared at the open sketchbook on her desk, the crisp pages waiting eagerly to be filled. Anticipation bubbled within her, yet so did fear. The urge to flee from the pressure of creation clawed at her gut. Questions raced through her thoughts, demanding answers. Was she strong enough to transform her vulnerabilities into art? And could embracing her voice be the very thing that ignited the reader's journey alongside hers? Just as she reached for her pencil, her phone buzzed on the desk, illuminating the screen with a new message. "I've been thinking about your idea. Call me. We need to discuss some things." Something inside her shifted. Perhaps her journey was just beginning, but at what cost? The air was thick with an intoxicating mix of anticipation and dread as Sarah paced her dimly lit apartment. The message from Jess remained fresh in her mind, a spark igniting the flickering flame of her ambition. It was funny how something as seemingly simple as a text could provoke such a tumultuous emotional response. Anxiety danced around her thoughts, every step echoing against the hardwood floors like the relentless chime of a clock ticking down to some invisible deadline. Taking a deep breath, she finally grabbed her notebook, the crisp pages staring at her with both promise and ridicule. Writing was supposed to be her refuge, yet it felt oddly like a cage. She opened it and stared blankly for a moment, struggling to filter the chaos swirling in her mind into coherent ideas and sketches. What if her truth proved too messy, too fragmented? She imagined outlining her characters, fractured portraits of herself, her fears, her insecurities. "What if they don't resonate?" echoed in her mind, but another voice countered. "What if they do?" The setting sun cast shadows across her desk, contrasting the warmth of the day with the chilling uncertainty that gripped her. As the orange glow dwindled, it ignited a resolve within her. She could either be a passive observer of her life or an active participant in shaping her narrative. Determined, she flipped to a fresh page and scrawled the header, "Character Development." Below it, she started to jot down ideas. The protagonist, equipped with all the depth of her fears and hopes, would bravely navigate the labyrinth of expectations. Each character would be a reflection, a vessel for the emotions she struggled to articulate. But a wave of fear flooded in. What if her drawings rendered them unrecognizable? What if they only produced ridicule instead of empathy? Clenching her fists, she forced herself to steady her breathing. It was only the beginning. It had to be raw. It had to be unrefined. As the night deepened, she worked meticulously, poring over her sketches and character outlines, constructing expansive backstories and vital inner conflicts. The hours slipped by, dangerously close to defeat. Distracted by a creeping sense of imposter syndrome, she snapped her pencil down, frustration boiling over. "What am I doing?" she muttered under her breath, feeling small, insignificant. "Who do I think I am to tell this story?" But then a realization burgeoned immediately. If she didn't take this leap, who would? The thought ignited a flicker of bravery in her. After all, art was built on vulnerability. For every moment of doubt, there resided a choice to embrace it, to transform it into something potent and credible. Renewed vigor surged through her veins as she returned to the sketchbook. The characters began to take shape on the page, reflecting shades of her own struggles, passions, and desires. She began to draft their journeys, steeped in struggle, in the quest for truth against oppressive silence. Days turned into a blur, adrenaline propelling her forward, as she dedicated every spare moment to refining her sketches. The more she drew, the more intricate the characters became. A distrustful antagonist surfacing from her past, a courageous ally embodying resilience. Despite the progress, the gnawing dread of exposure still lurked like a spectre. Here lay not only her creations but her hidden fears, the possibility of rejection darkening every page. And yet, she realized that these shadows were related to self-protection, an instinct driven by a desire to remain unseen. "Suffering is universal," she whispered, recalling Jess's words and the very essence of the narrative she was crafting. Realizing that her vulnerability could foster connection, she infused her characters' stories with honesty. As she read back through her sketches that night, moments of clarity emerged. Her journey of creation was not merely an exploration of personal struggle, but a quest for empowerment, the power of resilience illustrated through every frame. Just as she thought excitement might outweigh her doubts, a sudden notification lit up her phone. "Ready to connect and create? Let's discuss." The message pulled her back into the present, leaving her with a mix of eagerness and apprehension. What awaited her down this new path? Would she be ready not just to share her voice, but to confront the shadows lurking in the corners of her own narrative? Sarah stared at the screen, the words swirling in her mind like the leaves caught in an autumn whirl. The urgency of Jess's proposal rippled through her, nudging at her apprehensions while also sparking the thrill of possibility. "Let's discuss." It felt like a challenge, one that could propel her work into the realm of the real. But discussion brought scrutiny, and scrutiny invited judgment, a treacherous landscape that made her pulse quicken. She took a moment to breathe, but it was shallow in her chest. This opportunity could personify the conflict she had wrestled with for so long, the struggle between her yearning for connection and the fear of being misunderstood. Clenching her notebook tighter, she realized an undeniable truth. The narrative she crafted wasn't only worth sharing, it was a pathway to her own liberation. She glanced back at her sketches, a visual representation of her psychological labyrinth. Each character breathed parts of her. Each flaw represented a wound she was learning to navigate. What if they didn't just expose her? What if they brought her resilience to the forefront, like a phoenix emerging from ashes? Dismissing her hesitation, she began typing a response. The rhythm of her fingers against the keyboard mirrored a heart racing toward accountability. "Absolutely. When are you free to meet?" The simple act of saying yes was soaked in significance. It was her step into the unknown, into vulnerability, wrapped in the fragility of creativity. However, as daylight waned, doubt crept back in like a persistent shadow. This wouldn't be just a meeting. It would be a confrontation with not just her work, but the very essence of herself. What would Jess think of her characters? Would they be able to see the genius she believed lay in each sketch? Would they recognize the depths of her exploration, or would they only see what she feared most? The flaws she had painstakingly tried to mask. Resisting the urge to second-guess herself, she flipped through her notebook. Fragments of dialogue erupted from the pages, raw and unrefined. The courage she had infused into her characters began to bolster her own. In depicting their struggles, she felt herself cloak in the same bravery, transforming fear into a tool of empowerment, an emotional armor for the business of sharing her truth. The next day she stood before the mirror, running a hand through her messy hair. The reflection yielded more than just a writer's visage. It reflected a woman confronting a pivotal moment. This was more than art. It was a mission to unveil her hidden dreams, to thrust her voice into the cacophony of expression, validating her existence as an artist. As she left for the cafe where Jess had suggested meeting, a flurry of thoughts, doubts, and hopes ignited within her. The streets bustled around her, alive with purpose, yet her internal dialogue felt disjointed. The voices that typically shouted self-doubt were muted, replaced by her newly resolved mantra, "What if they do resonate?" The cafe's threshold loomed ahead. The boundaries between anticipation and dread warped as she stepped inside. The aroma of coffee engulfed her, an invigorating contrast to her lingering apprehension. Jess waved from a table, and Sarah approached, each step an embodiment of her commitment to her journey. The conversation kicked off with light-hearted banter, but Sarah sensed an opportunity for deeper exploration approaching like a tidal wave. Would she lead them there? Would she weave her struggles into the narrative over steaming cups and splatterings of ink? The thought both terrified and exhilarated her. As Jess leaned forward, her expression earnest and engaging, Sarah felt the moment stretch and crackle with potential. She could feel the urge to hold back, but instead, She willed herself to plunge into the depths of her fears, her voice trembling yet resolute. "What if I told you some of these characters are me?" she began, pulling in a breath that steadied her resolve, preparing to expose the gnarled roots of her creation. What would Jess do with the truth? The stakes suddenly felt monumental, and within that electric moment an understanding crystallized within her. Confrontation was inevitable, but it could also be liberating. As Sarah opened her sketchbook to reveal the first character, the air thickened with unspoken revelations, leaving her wondering if she could turn a simple discussion into a profound transformation for both her and Jess. Would this be the moment that catalyzed her true artistic awakening, or the start of unraveling layers she was not yet ready to face? The answer hung in the room, palpable and heavy, waiting for its chance to unfold. The character sprang to life on the page, a blend of raw vulnerability and intricate design that beckoned Jess's curiosity. Sarah felt her breath hitch as she watched Jess's eyes widen, anticipation building in the silence that followed. This was the moment, a precipice upon which her self-exposure teetered. "Wow," Jess finally breathed, leaning closer to the sketches. "There's so much depth here. Who is she?" The question hung in the air, and without thinking, Sarah blurted out, "She's me. Parts of me, anyway." Jess's eyebrows shot up, surprise swiftly replaced by a thoughtful expression. "You're not just illustrating characters. You're laying down your soul." With each passing moment, the adrenaline coursed through Sarah, illuminating the shadows where fear usually lurked. The deeper she ventured into her narratives, the more she realized these characters were mirrors reflecting facets of her existence, her aspirations, regrets, and unfiltered emotions. It was a revelation wrapped in layers of courage. "What led you to this?" Jess prompted, her voice gentle yet probing, coaxing Sarah to strip away the protective layers she'd placed over her art. Sarah hesitated. A veil of hesitation cloaked her thoughts. In that quiet pause, she confronted an older version of herself that would have shied away from such scrutiny. This time, however, she sifted through her internal chaos, pulling threads from the tapestry of her journey. "I've always felt like I've been hiding," she confessed, gesturing to an unrefined character in her sketchbook. Each sketch unearthed something I didn't know I needed to say. Jess leaned in, nodding intently, reveling in Sarah's burgeoning revelation. "And now?" "Now I think, the more I share, the more I heal." With those words, an unfurling warmth spread through her chest, transcending the confines of doubt. It was an acknowledgement that vulnerability and strength were intertwined in ways she had yet to fully understand. "Sarah, this is brave," Jess stated, a spark igniting in her green eyes. "It's not just art, it's a conversation, a way to connect, not only with your audience, but with yourself." An electric connection passed between them, igniting Sarah's determination further. Jess's encouragement became a lifeline, bridging the gap between self-judgment and validation. Yet shadows still stirred in her mind. What if sharing this rawness makes me even more vulnerable? What if people don't connect? Or worse, what if they misconstrue my intentions? Jess took a breath. Those fears are natural. I felt them too. But what if they do resonate? What if your truth breaks through someone else's isolation? In that moment, Sarah's swirling thoughts crystallized. Jess's words solidified the foundation of her next steps. She realized the importance of not merely presenting characters as stories, but as threads in a collective tapestry of humanity, ultimately guiding her toward a profound connection with her readers. "Would you help me?" The words slipped out before she realized it, asking for collaboration, a beloved anchor on her journey into the unpredictable waters of risk and authority. This was no longer just about her art. It was about igniting a dialogue born from authenticity. "Absolutely," Jess responded, her affirmation resonating like a chord struck deep within Sarah's heart. But even as they moved forward with newfound enthusiasm, Sarah couldn't shake the chilling reminder of impending scrutiny. Would the world truly find value in her rawness? The hesitation still lingered, a subtle tension with a looming edge. As their meeting drew to a close, a daunting question pounded in her chest like a drum. Could she really expose herself, unearthing the intricacies of her characters and through them her own self. The stakes felt insurmountable, yet the thrill of adventure thrilled her spirit. Determined, Sarah looked up at Jess, ready to step into the next phase of her evolution. What if we could turn this into something bigger? A project that speaks to those who feel lost. I want to know if I can take this leap. Jess's piercing gaze met hers with unspoken resolve. Then let's find your audience together. As they formulated a plan, Sarah felt the weight of the world shift. The promise of connection beckoned like a siren's call, but just as she felt herself being pulled toward the shore of progress, a flicker of dread ignited. Had she truly made peace with her past, or was she merely setting herself up for confrontation with her own demons? The answer remained as elusive as a mirage on her path forward, tantalizing yet frightening. Would she find the strength she sought to emerge empowered from this artistic reckoning, or would the shadows of her past engulf her once more? Sarah's resolve solidified, yet the echoes of doubt rattled within her mind. The following day she found herself staring at her sketchbook, the countless pages blank and unyielding, the urgency of creation crashing against the shore of her insecurities. Each untouched page mocked her ambition and whispered of her fears. Would exposing her truth resonate, or would it shatter her into pieces? Determined to confront this ambiguity head-on, she began sketching fervently, allowing the characters to emerge organically. As she poured her essence into their stories, the air around her seemed charged with an electric hum, a shift towards something transformative. Each stroke of her pencil became a step towards not only uncovering depths within herself, but also illuminating the paths of those she'd never met. But as Sarah immersed herself in her work, an unsettling strain crept in. Anxiety transformed her once comforting space into a battleground. What if the critique of her vulnerability turned harsh? Would her sketches be paraded around, open to scrutiny and judgment? Questions clouded her thoughts, eroding the foundation she had just begun to build. In moments of frustration, she turned to the one person who had become her anchor. She called Jess, her voice trembling slightly as she confessed the swirling chaos in her head. What if my past haunts me in this process? What if I can't portray these characters authentically? Your past is part of your narrative, Sarah. Acknowledge it, let it flow from your brush, Jess encouraged, her tone steady and supportive. Don't strive for perfection. Seek authenticity. You are not obliged to carry the burden of everyone's approval. Her words landed solidly, inspiring Sarah to shift her focus away from potential criticism. It was an invitation to release her grip on the idea of needing to please everyone and to welcome instead the power of her unique voice. This was, after all, about connection, genuine and raw. Re-energized, Sarah returned to her sketches. She redefined her approach, honoring the emotions that ran through her work. The sketches, previously constricted by fear, began to breathe. They developed their own identities, a reflection of the complexities that every human harbors. There lay the freedom to explore her truth, each character a vessel to traverse her past experiences while still crafting a meaningful narrative that could foster shared reflections. Days turned into nights as she immersed herself in this undertaking. As Sarah honed her craft, she also wrestled with the decision of how to present her art, debating whether she should launch an online platform or seek local galleries. Each option felt fraught with potential risk, returning the shadows of uncertainty. What if she bombarded the world with her insecurities before she'd even refined her voice? Yet the connection with her emotions pushed through the intensity of self-doubt. After countless rejections and revisions, Sarah solidified her decision to launch an online platform, the avenue that felt brave, yet terrifying. It was a public domain, and one where vulnerability could either be celebrated or ridiculed. That night as she lay in bed, exhaustion coursing through her body, a peculiar sensation gripped her heart. A mix of excitement and dread spun through her. She was on the brink of unveiling herself to the world, poised at the intersection of fear and liberation. But with that anticipation came a nagging question. Would she possess the fortitude to stand tall against potential backlash? Gathering her sketches anew, she whispered to herself, "This is worth the risk." But as she prepared to take that step into the unknown, another question loomed louder than before. Would the world, in its vastness, be ready to receive her essence? The light of her computer screen beckoned her forward, the moment of truth drawing near, yet that quiet fear nestled in the back of her mind refused to dissipate. What awaited her on the other side of this leap? An audience longing for connection, or an abyss filled with echoes of her own doubts? With the sun beginning to rise, its gentle glow spilling into her apartment, Sarah felt a renewed sense of purpose wash over her. The apprehension she had experienced throughout her journey now transformed into a steadfast resolve, a commitment not only to her work but to her very identity. She had wrestled with her goals, weighed her fears against a backdrop of hope, and finally emerged with clarity. Today would mark a pivotal moment in her journey. She sat down at her desk, her sketchbook open and pages filled with the fruits of her labor, each character a piece of herself that she had so courageously revealed. As she crafted the final outlines for her graphic novel, she reflected on how far she had come, from the hesitant, uncertain woman hiding in the shadows of her family's expectations to a creator ready to carve her own path. She spent the morning organizing her thoughts, finalizing her characters and plot points. The process felt exhilarating. The sensation of her pencil gliding smoothly across the paper reaffirmed the creative choice she had made to pursue her passion. No longer would she be tethered by the weight of familial obligation. She was liberating herself from that confinement, ready to share her truth with the world. Later that afternoon, after countless revisions and deliberate attention to every detail, Sarah clicked publish on her online platform. It was a simple website that showcased her graphic novel concept, complete with character descriptions, sample art, and her own personal story. The decision to reveal this vulnerable piece of her work felt monumental, yet liberating. In that moment, she tapped into the essence of empowerment, believing that her voice could resonate with those who needed to hear it. Once the link was live, Sarah felt a swell of anxiety, but along with it came a euphoric sense of achievement. She had taken the leap, risking exposure but also gaining the power to define herself on her own terms. The rush of pride coiled around her, giving nourishment to her dreams and aspirations. In the ensuing days, the response to her work began to build. Followers from all over shared their reflections and personal connections to her stories. People reached out, sharing their own struggles and triumphs, and Sarah found herself embraced by a community she hadn't anticipated. It was a vivid reminder that by sharing her vulnerability, she had ignited the courage in others to do the same. Messages of support poured in, and one in particular stood out. A young artist who felt lost in the confines of familial expectations mirrored Sarah's past. With tears in her eyes, Sarah crafted the response, encouraging her to embrace her voice. It struck her profoundly how her journey had come full circle. She was now not only the protagonist of her narrative, but also a source of inspiration for others. As she sat cross-legged in her living room, the sunlight cascading through the window, Sarah felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The act of creation had not only provided her with the tools to carve her identity, but also illuminated a path that could help others reclaim their narratives. In that moment of realization, she understood that personal growth was an ongoing journey filled with ebbs and flows. The fears that once paralyzed her now fueled her resilience. Each doubt transformed into an opportunity for authentic expression. Her vision had materialized into a completed project, but it was also a stepping stone to further endeavors she had yet to imagine. The culmination of her efforts had been met with palpable recognition, not just in the form of likes, shares, or heartfelt comments, but in the resonance of shared stories and the connections they cultivated. Sarah had forged new relationships founded on vulnerability, a network built upon empowerment, where she could continue to expand her voice and support others in their journeys. Through her experience, Sarah had conquered not only the external voices of doubt, but also the internal critics that had chained her to her fears. She had proven to herself that pursuing a passion could lead to personal fulfillment and ultimately a profound impact on others. The fear of judgment had become a mere whisper against the empowering chorus of collective understanding. As she reflected on her journey, Sarah smiled, savoring the vibrant potential that lay before her. This was just the beginning. She had crafted her narrative, reclaimed her voice, and inspired others to do the same. And in this recognition of achievement, Sarah felt solid confidence settle within her, a tribute to the hard-fought transformation she had undergone. She had conquered her fear, embraced her identity, and crafted a legacy not only for herself, but for those who would find solace and strength in her story. Now more than ever, she was ready to take the next leap, armed with resilience, authenticity, and an unwavering belief that her voice mattered. She was no longer confined to anyone else's script. As her heart soared with renewed hope and excitement for what lay ahead, she resolved to keep creating, keep sharing, and most importantly, keep lifting others as she continued on her remarkable journey. You need to subscribe now to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and show your support. Comment your reactions and theories about this incredible journey. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share. The world needs to hear these powerful narratives of personal growth,